Exactly 71 years ago, the Crimean Tatars were expelled from their native land.
God gave us this land to live, protect it, and it will feed us.
May 1944, the Soviet army forcibly deported more than 180,000 people. Only after almost half a century were the Crimean Tatars finally allowed to return home.
Firstly, we were returning homeland. When we moved from Kuban, we were told, "Why you are leaving? You have the cars, houses here. Where are you going?" We said, "We want back home, that our children can study in their native language."
Today, thanks to the Russian occupation of Crimea, the Tatars are once again outcasts in their own land.
Thanks to this regime, I have never seen my grandparents. In 1973, one of my grandfathers from Yalta was killed. On the 4th of April, 1938, another grandfather was shot in Bakhchisarai. In 1944, we were evicted, and I never got to see my grandparents again. My parents and 4 sisters stayed in the desert of Uzbekistan.
And now Crimean Tatars, just like during the days of Stalin's repression, are once again victimized, harassed, intimidated, and even murdered.
They know our source codes. They know where to hit. That's why all our phones and internet are wiretapped.
Tatars are now even barred from holding mourning events to honor the tens of thousands of ancestors whose lives were destroyed during the Soviet repression and deportation.
None of these people accept Russia in Crimea, and they live in a state of constant fear. They don't know when somebody will break into their house and what will be the reason for this invasion.
The organizers of the anniversary of the deportation have been intimidated and labeled criminals.
I recommend you to stop. When entire people are forbidden to pray in memory of their dead and repressed, it was the first time I'd seen it. Even in the Soviet Union, it was not so. I remember it very well. So I could not do this as well? Tatars now go through the same emotions as our parents and grandparents. So we have something similar now, but we will remain in our homeland.
The soldiers came for them late at night. Under the pretext of aiding the German invaders, Russian soldiers broke into the homes of Crimean Tatars, giving them only 15 minutes to collect their things. Frightened families were given just enough time for taking clothes and basic possessions. They were taken to the nearest train station and loaded like cattle into freight cars. Conditions were deplorable and many died during the journey. The Tatars were strictly forbidden from leaving the place where they were deported to. Whole families died from different diseases during the journey. 6 to 8 people per day died during the deportation. Only during the 1980s were the Crimean Tatars allowed to return home.
These lands were empty, and we had to petition the local authorities to allow us to live here.
According to official data, 1.5 times more people returned to Crimea than were deported. In this rare archive footage, we can see how hard life was for the Crimean Tatars, returning to their homeland and starting everything anew.
There is no water all summer long. In the morning there was water. All the water ran out, buckets went dry.
But then, 20 years ago, this nation again found its home.
Поливать там этими кружками, воды нет, ничего нет.
Ничего, зато на родине живем.
Ну что, лодку здесь осадили?
Мои дети будут знать свою культуру, свои традиции.
The Tatars are afraid they are losing their homeland again. A year after Russia invaded Ukraine, 10,000 Crimeans escaped from the peninsula.
Each person has a reason to leave. Some say to get a new education, others to work for foreign firms, and many families left fearing for the future of their children. Some Tatars left because of anti-Islam sentiments.
In Crimea, the current exodus is called a voluntary movement of migrants. Many came here to the nearby Kherson region, a transit point for the Crimean Tatars.
Today, Tatar oppression is rampant, with the occupying authorities pressuring Tatar clergy, businesses, and independent media.
Many of the Tatars barred from returning home to Crimea settle here.
They create a situation where the person should leave. Whether or not they agree, there is no choice. The Tatars are being forced out in whatever way they can.
This is Novo-Alexeyevka village in Henchesk district. Almost half of its 10,000 inhabitants are Tatars.
What good did Crimean Tatars get from Russia? And what prospects could there be for Crimean Tatars under Russian control when they see what's happening in Chechnya and Abkhazia?
Gulnara Bikarova is one of those who escaped from occupied Crimea and started a new life here. She was a member of a Crimean Tatar anti-Russian rally a year ago, and she saw with her own eyes the seizure of the building of the Crimean government.
The people who live in the Crimea, Russians and Ukrainians, have already realized that their expectations have not been met.
But this is not yet the moment the Tatars will rebel.
Our ornament is symbolic. It has its own semantics, and there are novels on it.
Rustem Skiban, a world-famous ceramicist, also had to leave home after the March events in Crimea.
The entirely negative experience that the Crimean Tatars had with the Russian Empire showed that we have a similar threat now.
Fearing for the cultural heritage of his people, he immediately went to the capital Kiev and took his entire collection in case it was confiscated by the occupying authorities.
When the military equipment appeared in bulk and we started patrolling villages, then I decided to bring the whole collection to mainland Ukraine and save it there.
Crimeans say the occupation of the peninsula is again a threat to their culture. After all, everything that they have achieved during the past 23 years is now under threat.
Our cultural heritage is suffering from the annexation, deportations or displacements. Thanks to one subject, this clay jug, for example, we can learn about our history and our identity.
Керамическому кувшину мы можем узнать о целой профессии.
Those who remained now live in constant fear, exactly like in Stalin's time. Families fear one day someone will come for them.
I often think, if they will come for me, I am with a small child, and I will do anything.
We try to find out under what principle they kidnap and kill people, but it's difficult to understand. The impression is that this is done to instill fear in people.
Tatars feel like an uninvited guest is stalking their homeland, breaking everything the Tatars carefully built over the past 2 decades.
My grandson went to Crimean Tatar class in school, but there is now no Ukrainian language at all. Now it's Russian only and a little bit of Tatar.
The closure of the TV channel ATR, the only Crimean Tatar channel in the world, was a shock to the indigenous population of Crimea.
We didn't cry on air, and nobody will ever get that from us. We said goodbye to our audience, but we said that we would go back. We always come back.
It was closed like all the other media on the peninsula, which did not want to glorify the occupation regime.
ATR was not a radical channel. The only fault of this channel was that they weren't lying. They gave objective information. I don't understand why they closed the children's channel, which was part of this group. It had nothing in common with politics or news.
Just like half a century ago, they took away Tatars' right to vote and opportunity to defend the interests of their countrymen.
Today they say that the laws work, but they work in one direction only. And if you enter court, you will not be able to leave. There are no laws. It's senseless to prove something.
And those who are still trying to get to the truth are already under investigation or in prison.
My deputy Akhtem has been in prison since January 29th, and he and some others are accused of participating in a demonstration which took place on February 26, 2014. So the new authorities want to apply the article of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation.
All property owned by the Crimean Tatar Assembly, called the Majlis, was nationalized.
Everything is locked. Everything is taken away. They fined us 4.5 million rubles, which is obviously not possible to pay. Now is the process of removal.
The Majlis is one of the main obstacles in implementing the strategic goals of Russia in Crimea. Therefore, Russia's secret service, the FSB, is using Crimean Tatars against one another.
There is still a very small contingent of Tatars who fear that the Russians will leave. They will also have to go to Russia because they collaborated with the invaders. They are the so-called fifth column.
Crimean Tatars who now work with the occupiers are simply traitors in the eyes of most people. They sold their soul to Putin because of their selfish interests.
They did nothing to stop these searches in mosques, in the families of Crimean Tatars. They did nothing to stop the persecution of patriots, the Crimean Tatars. They went for themselves.
In addition to the tense atmosphere in which Crimean Tatars are now forced to live, their standard of living also fell.
When I got 1,500 hryvnias pension, it was enough. But now I get just 12,000 rubles, and it's not enough.
The Crimean Tatars receive Russian passports because they have to, and they receive Russian pensions because they have to live.
Ukraine continues to feed Crimea. Ukraine feeds the Russian army and feeds all who are here.
We expected that after the referendum of the 16th of March 2014, Ukraine would block everything.
People have lost their businesses that sustained them for many years.
If Ukraine doesn't supply the peninsula, shops will remain empty everywhere. There is no water here, so it's impossible to grow. People had small businesses, but it became unprofitable. It's difficult to make something here. That's why many people have closed their business.
People here generally speak reluctantly about the tourism season. They understand that the sunny peninsula of Crimea turned into a massive Russian military base.
Last year, they promised a lot of tourists would come here. Last year, Crimea survived thanks to Donetsk residents who ran away from there. They had to be fed, so those were our tourists. But this year, we don't know how it will be.
Я не знаю в этом году какой будет туризм.
People say problems bring people together, and the Crimean Tatars are now closer than ever with the Ukrainians.
Ukraine, for so many centuries, has been struggling for its independence. We have been struggling for our independence. This is a common disaster. As the saying goes, and it unites us. A man who struggles knows the value of life.
All these questions that you ask us, we ask each other. Why do we want to be with Ukraine? These people like us are faithful to their religion and to their language.
It's painful for the Crimean Tatars to hear Ukrainians say they could not defend Crimea.
The Crimean Tatars are Ukrainian citizens. They confirmed it on the first day they started arriving here. We expected more help from Ukraine, but Ukraine left us. It did not believe in us. But it opened its eyes and saw who is a friend and who is a foe.
Even though Ukraine has ignored the Crimean Tatars for a very long time, they hope that Crimea will be Ukrainian again.
Sevimli Kırım'da yaşayan cemaat, hem Kırım Tatarlar, hem Ruslar, Ermeniler, Ukrainsler, hepsiler. Siz biliniz, mında Ukraynada biz her daim, her vaqt, her kun bilemiz hem pek isteymiz. Siz de biliniz. Biz sizni sevamiz ve her kun o kadar çok elbette yapmak olamay ama yapgan işimiz siz için. Yapgan işimiz öyle ki Kırım Ukrayna'da olacak inşallah. Ve birinciden özünü saklanız. Sabır etmek gerek. Anlayayım bu ağır şey. Ama inşallah her şey yaxşı olur. Amin ya Rabbim. Özünü saklanız.